The day the cradle disappeared, the mining ship, Perseverance, drifted through the Kuiper Belt. Its crew of 43 souls focused on extracting helium-3 from the frozen rocks at the edge of human space. Captain Jonas Reeves watched the extraction robots work their magic on the distant view screen, unaware that in exactly 17 minutes, everything humanity knew about its place in the universe would change forever. Navigator Sarah Chen was the first to notice something wrong. The gravitational calculations for their return trajectory kept failing. The computer systems, triple redundant and tested across thousands of missions, simply refused to plot a course back to Earth. She ran the diagnostics 3 times before calling out to the captain. The numbers weren't adding up because the gravitational anchor point they used for navigation, Earth itself, had vanished from their sensors. Jonas thought it was a joke at first. Earth didn't just disappear. Planets, especially ones hosting 12 billion souls and serving as the beating heart of an interstellar civilization, didn't simply cease to exist. But as more crew members confirmed the readings, the awful truth began to sink in. Earth was gone. Not destroyed, not hidden, but completely absent from space-time as if it had never existed at all. The next hours brought chaos across human space. The Mars colonies, always proud of their independence, suddenly found themselves as the de facto capital of humanity. Governor Elizabeth Warren stood in the emergency command center beneath Olympus Mons, watching as reports flooded in from across the solar system. Europa Station had lost contact with Earth mid-transmission. The asteroid mining facilities reported the same gravitational anomaly. The great shipyards orbiting where Earth should have been were simply floating in empty space, their umbilical connections severed to nothing. The economic collapse came within days. Earth had been the central banking system, the Supreme Court of interstellar law, the hub of all major trade routes. Without it, the carefully balanced economy that supported 37 colony worlds across 15 star systems crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. The Proxima colonies declared independence within a week. The mining worlds of Wolf 359 stopped shipping resources altogether, hoarding what they had for an uncertain future. On the generation ship New Horizon, heading for a distant star system, Captain Michael Torres made a decision that would echo through the centuries. Instead of continuing to their destination, he ordered the ship to find an uninhabited system and hide. His crew of 5,000 would become the first of the lost tribes, humans who vanished into the dark between stars rather than face whatever had taken Earth. The first year without Earth claimed 3 billion lives across the colonies. Not from violence or war, but from the simple breakdown of supply chains. Medicines manufactured only on Earth ran out. Food shipments never arrived. Technical expertise concentrated in Earth's universities was lost forever. Mars managed to maintain some order, but even they struggled. The Red Planet had always relied on Earth for certain critical components, advanced medical equipment and genetic diversity for their breeding programs. As decades passed, humanity began to change. The void stations in the asteroid belt, cut off from regular supply runs, developed closed-loop ecosystems that required perfect efficiency. Their children grew taller and thinner in the low gravity, their bones becoming hollow like birds, their eyes enlarging to capture more light in the darkness. They called themselves the Void Dancers, and within 3 generations they could no longer walk on planets with normal gravity. The deep miners on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn went the opposite direction. They enhanced their bodies with genetic modifications stolen from Earth's databases before the connection was lost. They became shorter, denser, their muscles packed with artificial fibers that could work in crushing pressure and deadly cold. They called themselves the Stonehearts, and they trusted no one outside their clan tunnels. Mars tried to hold the center, establishing the Martian Republic and claiming to be the legitimate successor to Earth's government. But their authority only extended as far as their warships could reach, and fuel was precious now. The outer colonies simply ignored their proclamations, developing their own governments, their own languages, their own ways of being human. On Kepler 442b, the colonists had to adapt to a world with gravity 30% higher than Earth. Within 5 generations, they had become something new. Their bones were like iron, their hearts twice the size of normal humans, their skin thick enough to handle the increased radiation from their star. They forgot Earth songs, Earth stories, and eventually, they forgot Earth had ever been real at all. The spaceborne traders, who had lived their entire lives on ships moving between systems, became the only link between humanity's scattered children. They developed their own culture, their own rituals, never setting foot on any world but carrying news and genes between the isolated pockets of humanity. They painted their ships in bright colors and sang old Earth songs that slowly morphed into something unrecognizable. 400 years after the vanishing, as historians would later call it, humanity had become 100 different things. The swimmers of Europa had developed gills and could survive in the moon's hidden oceans. The cloud dancers of Venus lived in floating cities. Their lungs adapted to process the thin atmosphere at high altitudes. The radiation eaters near Sagittarius A had developed organs that could convert gamma rays into usable energy. Professor Diana Kumar, one of the last pure-strain humans living on Mars, spent her life studying what had happened. She collected stories from every branch of humanity, trying to piece together the truth. Some believed Earth had been destroyed by aliens. Others thought it had been pulled into another dimension. A few insisted Earth had never existed at all, that it was a shared delusion, a creation myth for a species that had always lived among the stars. But Diana knew the truth was simpler and more terrifying. Earth had been taken. By whom or for what purpose she couldn't say. But the precision of its removal, the complete absence of any debris or gravitational echoes, suggested intelligence and purpose. Someone or something had reached across space and plucked humanity's birth world like picking an apple from a tree. The 5th century after the vanishing brought new challenges. The separate branches of humanity had diverged so far that they could barely recognize each other as the same species. Wars broke out over resources, not between nations but between subspecies. The Void Dancers raided Stoneheart mining operations. The Martian Republic tried to force the cloud cities of Venus to pay tribute. The Radiation Eaters were declared non-human by 3 different colonial governments. Commander Alex Riley of the Martian Defense Force stood on the bridge of his warship, looking at the tactical display showing 17 different human factions in the solar system alone. Each group had their own ships, their own weapons, their own vision for humanity's future. They were no longer one people but a fractured mirror, each piece reflecting a different possible path for human evolution. The return that changed everything. The detection came from an unlikely source. A Void Dancer child named Echo, barely 16 Earth years old, was practicing with the deep space sensors on mining platform 7 when she noticed an anomaly. Where empty space had existed for 5 centuries, something massive had appeared. The gravitational signature was unmistakable. Earth had returned. The news spread through human space like wildfire, but reactions varied wildly. The Martian Republic immediately claimed authority over the returned world. The Stonehearts declared it a trap and refused to investigate. The space traders began plotting courses to be the first to arrive, sensing profit in the discovery. But none of them were prepared for what they would find. Captain Riley, now Admiral of the Combined Martian Fleet, led the first expedition to Earth. His crew was carefully chosen from multiple human subspecies, a political necessity in the fractured solar system. As they approached Earth's position, their instruments went wild. The planet was there, blue and white and beautiful as the old pictures showed, but it was surrounded by something impossible. A sphere of crystallized time. The barrier shimmered like frozen starlight, and as they approached, their communication systems activated with a signal no human had heard in 500 years. It was music, orchestral and haunting, a style that had died with Earth's disappearance. Then came a voice speaking in an accent that no longer existed anywhere else in human space. "Welcome home, children of the stars. We have been waiting for you." The voice belonged to Administrator Yuki Tanaka, or what had been Yuki Tanaka 5 centuries ago. When Earth vanished, she had been a mid-level bureaucrat in the Global Climate Initiative. Now she spoke for the 12 billion humans who had never left Earth, who had experienced something beyond imagination, while their distant cousins evolved among the stars. Earth hadn't been destroyed or moved. It had been selected. An intelligence older than the galaxy itself had chosen humanity for an experiment, but not the humans who had already spread to the stars. It wanted to observe the species at its point of origin, to understand what made these chaotic primates capable of reaching beyond their world. For Earth, only 5 years had passed inside the time bubble, 5 years of tests, challenges, and revelations that had transformed the population in ways that made the physical evolution of the colonies seem trivial. The humans of Earth had been exposed to the knowledge of 1,000,000 civilizations, shown the birth and death of universes, given tools to manipulate reality itself. Yuki demonstrated by holding out her hand. Reality rippled around her fingers, and suddenly she held a flower that had never evolved on Earth, its petals shifting through colors that human eyes shouldn't be able to perceive. The colonists' instruments couldn't explain what they were seeing. It wasn't technology or biology, but something beyond either. The beings that had taken Earth called themselves the gardeners. They were so ancient that the universe itself was just their latest experiment. They collected species at crucial moments in their development, preserving them, studying them, sometimes returning them changed. Humanity had passed their test, but not in the way anyone expected. The test wasn't for Earth alone, but for all humanity. The gardeners wanted to see what would happen when a species' birth world vanished. Would they unite or fragment? Would they evolve or stagnate? Would they remember their origin or forget it entirely? The answer was all of the above, and that diversity, that chaotic creativity in the face of impossible loss, had impressed the gardeners. Now Earth had returned with gifts. The 12 billion humans who had lived through the bubble years had been changed at a fundamental level. They could perceive dimensions beyond the standard 4. They could communicate through quantum entanglement. They could manipulate matter at the subatomic level with thought alone. They had become something between human and God, but they still remembered being human. The collision between Earth's transformed population and the evolved colonies created tensions nobody had anticipated. The Void Dancers, proud of their adaptation to space, found that Earth humans could survive in vacuum without any physical changes, simply by willing a bubble of altered space around themselves. The Stonehearts, with all their genetic enhancements, watched Earth children lift mountains with their minds. But the greatest shock came when Earth revealed the full truth. The gardeners hadn't just been testing humanity. They had been testing thousands of species across the galaxy, each put through their own trials. And now, with the experiments complete, they were bringing all these species together. Humanity would need every branch, every evolution, every adaptation to survive what was coming. The galaxy was about to become a lot more crowded. Species that had been isolated for millions of years would suddenly find themselves neighbors. Some would be friendly, others would not. The gardeners were creating a new kind of universe, one where only the most adaptable, the most creative, and the most resilient would thrive. President Chen of the Martian Republic met with Administrator Tanaka in Earth's newly constructed orbital platform, a structure that seemed to exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously. They were no longer the same species, not really. Chen's ancestors had adapted to Mars over 20 generations. Tanaka had been transformed by forces beyond human understanding, but they were both human. Both part of the same story that had begun when the first humans looked up at the stars and wondered. The choice before humanity was simple and impossible. They could remain fractured, each branch pursuing its own path, potentially falling to the challenges ahead. Or they could unite, combining the physical evolution of the colonies with the transcendent capabilities of Earth, becoming something greater than either alone. The debate raged across human space. The isolationist Stonehearts wanted nothing to do with Earth's gifts, fearing the loss of their hard-won identity. The Void Dancers saw opportunity in the merger but demanded guarantees of autonomy. The Radiation Eaters near the galactic center had evolved so far that they barely considered themselves human anymore, and questioned whether unity was even possible. But as the first alien ships began appearing at the edge of human space, dropped off by the gardeners from their own trials, the choice became urgent. The new arrivals were as diverse as humanity had become. Some were energy beings that existed as living plasma. Others were hive minds spanning thousands of bodies. A few were machine intelligences that had long ago transcended their organic creators. In the end, it was a child who provided the answer. Luna Martinez, born on Mars to Void Dancer parents, educated on Earth during a cultural exchange and enhanced with Stoneheart mining implants, stood before the assembled representatives of humanity's branches. She was all of them and none of them, a living bridge between humanity's divergent paths. "We don't have to choose," she said, her voice carrying across the quantum communication network that Earth's scientists had established. "We're not one humanity anymore. We're 1,000 humanities, and that's our strength. The gardeners didn't break us. They multiplied us. Every challenge ahead has a human solution because we've become every possible version of human." The Terran Accord, signed 5 years after Earth's return, didn't create a single government or merge the subspecies. Instead, it created a framework for cooperation that preserved diversity while enabling unity when needed. Earth became a library of transcendent knowledge, available to all but forced on none. Mars remained the political center for those who chose traditional governance. The outer colonies continued their unique developments, now with Earth's protection and support. When the first hostile species attacked, believing humanity to be weak and fractured, they faced not one opponent but dozens. Void dancers struck from the darkness between stars. Stonehearts emerged from asteroids thought to be empty. Earth humans simply thought the attacking fleet out of existence, transforming their weapons into flowers that bloomed in the vacuum of space. The message was clear across the galaxy. Humanity had been tested, broken, reformed, and emerged stronger than ever. They were no longer just the children of Earth, but the children of the universe itself, adapted to every environment, ready for any challenge. The gardeners observed with something approximating satisfaction. Of all the species they had tested, only humanity had chosen to become not one thing but everything. As Admiral Riley stood on the observation deck of the Unity Station, a structure built jointly by all human factions, he watched Earth spin below. It looked exactly as it had in the old pictures, blue and white and perfect. But now it was surrounded by the ships of 100 human cultures, each unique, each essential, each part of the greater whole. The stars beckoned with new challenges. Other species waited, some as friends, others as foes. The universe had become a vast garden where only the most adaptable would flourish. But humanity was ready. They had survived the loss of their birth world, evolved in 1,000 directions and reunited not as one people, but as a constellation of possibilities. Earth had vanished for 5 centuries, and when it returned, nothing was the same. But that was exactly as it should be, because in the darkness of loss, humanity had found not one light but millions, each burning bright, each showing a different path forward. The greatest test had forged the greatest triumph. Humanity hadn't just survived. They had transcended, becoming something the universe had never seen before. A single species with infinite forms, united in their diversity, stronger for their differences. The story of humanity's future had just begun, written not in one voice but in a chorus that would echo across the stars for millennia to come.